Hello and welcome back to the F2 show. I'm your host Fraser Ford, and joining me to look ahead to this weekend, we have Inside F2 editor LA Wilshaw, and we have Inside F2 writer Lawrence Griffin. Coming up on the show then, Baku is always an entertaining weekend, but is it the best round on the Formula 2 calendar? Our guests discuss all. We look at who could be the drivers to watch out this weekend. And we take a look at what drivers could be weighing up their options come next year as we head into silly season. But before we do all of that, LA, Lawrence, great to have you with us. LA, I'll come to you first. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really good. Yeah, it's nice to have a little bit of a breather, isn't it? After a back to back. So yeah, it's lovely, and weather's picking up, isn't it? So yeah, let's have a good summer ahead.
Yeah, happy days, happy days. You are right. It's nice to have a little break. Lawrence, are you looking forward to Baku?
Oh yeah, I can't really remember a dull race at Baku, and I'm sure this weekend again won't disappoint. So I can't wait to see what we've got there. You know, after Monaco, I want to see some proper wheel to wheel action, and I know Baku will provide.
Absolutely. And sorry, I didn't ask, how are you? I'm jumping straight into the racing because I'm excited for it. But yeah, you're all good?
Yeah, couldn't be better. Might even be
Good.
better after this weekend.
May well be. You are right, though, that plenty of overtaking opportunities at Baku, maybe a little bit more than what we saw at Monaco. So that is definitely good news. Okay, let's take a look at the championship standings heading into round 6. Felipe Drugovich extended his championship lead last time out to a massive 32 points over Teo Pourchaire. Jehan Daruvala and Marcus Armstrong will be hoping to close the gap to the top 2 this weekend. They sit 3rd and 4th in the standings. And Yuri Vips and Jack Doohan round out the top 6. And the team standings? MP Motorsport topped the team standings by 29 points from ART. High-Tech moved into 3rd in the standings last time out, ahead of Prema. And a tough weekend for Carlin in Monaco. They sit in 5th, with Virtuosi rounding out the top 6. And the full standings are available on our website, www.insidef2.com. Okay, Baku, let's get into it then. One of the fan favourites on the calendar. What is it about Baku, and what is it about the circuit design, the layout that makes it so good for racing, LA?
As a racing circuit, we have, the flat out sections, which are incredibly exciting for a street circuit. The speed that they get up to there in section 1 and section 3. And then you've also got that really, amazing sort of tricky slow speed section around the castle in section 2 at sector 2. And your 2 DRS zones, of course. So, it's opportunity for overtaking. We know that from a Formula 2 point of view. We already know from last year the moves that Dan Tickton was making, the overtakes that he was pushing himself around a bit, elbows out, wasn't he, on some narrow sections too. But I think Baku's just got a little bit of everything, and it's one of my favourites on the calendar.
Yeah, it really is a unique circuit in that it really does have that that tight, twisty bit in sector 2, as you say, LA, and then the 2 straights. Is that the thing that stands out for you, Lawrence? And we actually, funny enough, LA, you mentioned Dan Tickton. We have a question on Instagram. We'll go straight in with the questions as well. At Jim Kimberley, friend of the show on Instagram, asked who will do a Dan Tickton this year and provide an overtaking masterclass, Lawrence.
Oh, that's so difficult to call, because that's almost like asking who are we banking on to have a bad qualifying session and then come through the order. Maybe perhaps a good qualifying and a good sprint race as well. I think Liam Lawson looked pretty racy last year in Baku, so I'd back him to be putting on the moves again this year. I think there was even a moment he was a little bit over aggressive in his defence and got a penalty for it. But I think, this year, it hasn't gone perfectly for him. He'll be wanting to come back and he'll be getting the elbows out again, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to seeing that. And obviously, historically, LA Baku has been a bit of a chaotic race weekend. I think that's fair to say. At Milo Collins 54 on Twitter asks hashtag the F2 show. Love to see it. Hashtag the F2 show. Has the mentality of some of the drivers changed over recent years? Do they take more of a conservative approach since the carnage of the early years going into Baku? And by the carnage of the early years, I'm assuming he's talking about Baku 2016, which was well, probably one of the messiest weekends in single seater racing ever. I think I've seen. To be fair, what do you think, Ellie?
I don't think they have backed off at all. You know, last season, as Lawrence just alluded to, that there was plenty of sort of incidents and accidents coming together. You know, and there were time penalties. Obviously, there was one for Lawson in that feature race, and also for Dan Ticktum. And you know, there was collisions with Guan Yu Zhou and Dan Ticktum in, I think it was second sprint race. Um, and from the back, you know, you saw Liam Lawson pretty handy. He did qualify in pole, but pretty handy, working his way up the field. And Piastri and also Dan, you know, they were all sort of not doing well, and then they finished and scored points. So I feel that they were being, you know, incredibly aggressive and attacking that circuit like they would do anywhere else. And as I said before, you know, you saw Dan with those 4 overtakes in that one particular race. You know, he wasn't afraid whatsoever, and him with Poucher and Armstrong, you know, when they came together, that sort of cringe-worthy, like, oh no, kind of scene. And poor Teo broke his wrist, you know, from that accident. All 3 of them were going for that corner, weren't they? Really, none of them were yielding to each other. So yeah, I mean, you know, there was a lap 1 accident with Lawson. Was that Lawson and Piastri lap 1 accident in the first sprint race? So no, they're not holding back. They're not going to hold back. This is Formula 2. Don't forget. You know, there are no holdbacks in Formula 2, are there?
Absolutely not, and we don't want to see them holding back either, do we? We want to see them really pushing, and yeah, we want to see what they're capable of, right? So, Lawrence, do you think that for that maybe drivers that aren't used to scoring points, haven't scored as many points this season, do you think that they'll be hoping for chaos in front of them, so that it could be an opportunity for them to keep their noses clean and collect some points?
Definitely, the Baku always has that ability to throw up an unpredictable race and to throw some carnage in there. And so I think from that, those drivers that are maybe slightly further down the order, or drivers who haven't had the perfect season compared to how their pace has been so far, they might actually need to be slightly conservative and sort of wait for some of the more aggressive drivers to sort of make a few slips in order to get past them. Because of course there is such a risk here with the walls being so close, that if someone does go for a bit of an ambitious move like Dan Ticktum did last year, then all of a sudden several cars could be out of the race and you find yourself well up the order. And that also opens the gap for plenty of different strategies in the feature race as well. Are we going to have some people running long on the harder tyres and waiting to pit under safety car and then suddenly vaulting up the order when that happens? There's just the potential for all sorts to happen. And it's such a contrast to Monaco, where it's so predictable who's going to be winning the race based on qualifying. So I think it'll be a brilliant watch, and hopefully for those drivers hoping to make an improvement this season, they can sort of show a bit of their quality.
Yeah, absolutely. High chance of a safety car, as you say, which could be a game changer in particularly in the feature race, but could be in a sprint race as well. So we look forward to seeing that. Now, big question. There are plenty of good circuits on the Formula 2 calendar. Okay, but we speak about Baku and it being so chaotic and unpredictable. Is it the best round on the Formula 2 calendar, in your opinion, LA Wilshaw? And if not, what is your favorite calendar, your favorite circuit on the calendar?
Yeah, I think it's up there. You know, I don't think I can sort of say there's a number one, that if I could only watch one race in a season, I would be able to sort of pick one out of the few that I love. But it is absolutely up there, probably in a top 3. But I love Spa. You know, I love Spa Francorchamps, and it's a again, probably scenery too, but it's just the Eau Rouge Rayon, and the rest of the circuit as well. But that just brings such a lot of excitement to my stomach, even though I'm not on the circuit. But Baku is absolutely, yeah, I couldn't, it's one of those races I couldn't miss. I've had a discussion with a family member about potentially sort of being a bit distracted next weekend by something. And I was like, nah, no, stop, no, it's Baku. There's no way, no way.
Lawrence, same question to you. Up there in terms of one of your favourite circuits on the calendar, and what is your favourite circuit on the calendar?
It's definitely up there. It's difficult. It's tempting to be all over patriotic with the Jubilee and say Silverstone, but that always offers
British
brilliant
bias, though.
racing.
British bias.
Well, no, we can't have that, so I can't say Silverstone. I think I might say Monza actually, in terms of how much history there is there. I think that race has something really special about it. Can sometimes suffer with the DRS trains, but in general, there's enough opportunity for the overtaking there. Monza's one of my favourites. Could Baku just about pip it? Maybe. I think Baku is slightly more chaotic. So I think, yeah, why not? I'd say Baku, my favourite circuit. There you go.
There we go. There you go. That's what we wanted. That's the headline right there, isn't it, LA, for you writers? There you go. No, good stuff. No, really looking forward to Baku this weekend. It will be, it'll be chaotic regardless, won't it? So let's wait and see. Let's move on. Let's talk about some drivers. Are we looking at potentially Drugovich versus Pourchaire again? Lawrence, I absolutely love seeing that in Monaco. Is that a battle that we could see again this weekend?
Yeah, absolutely. We were given a really tense spectacle at Monaco. Drugovich not cracking under the pressure, Pourchaire, piling on the pressure onto him. But it was a bit of a shame in that we sort of knew that Pourchaire wasn't going to make a move because of how much risk there is there. So those last few laps were a bit of a tease, really. But this time round, if they find themselves at the front, which is quite likely they will be, we can expect some genuine wheel-to-wheel action. They've been pulling away from the rest of the field so far this year, so there's no reason why they won't be up there again fighting for the win. But somehow that feels too obvious, too predictable for F2, and especially too predictable for Baku. As we've said time and time again, there are so many drivers that have looked quick this season. Yuri Vips had a solid, clean weekend in Monaco. He will have regained some confidence after such a disappointing time in Barcelona. Liam Lawson set the quickest lap in Monaco. Of course, it was deleted, but he'll be desperate to show that pace again. Deruval is right up there in the championship hunt, and Armstrong has been quietly consistent all year, and he sort of crept his way up the order. Imola's feature race was the only time when he finished a race outside of the top 10. So really, who knows who'll be fighting for the race win? It's so wonderfully unpredictable, this series. But if you're a betting person and had to put your money down on two drivers you expect to find themselves at the pointy end of the race, you couldn't look past Pourchaire and Drugovich, because they have been slightly on another level so far this year, and it would be awesome to see them battling again, but battling properly, battling wheel to wheel.
Definitely going to be more overtaking opportunities, as we've already said, this weekend. Let's talk about some of those guys that Lawrence has just spoken about, LA. High tech, really strong weekend in Monaco. Yuri Vips obviously coming into this weekend knowing that he won 2 races here last season, obviously in the 3 race format. Is this the weekend off the back of Monaco, a consistent weekend? Is this the weekend where he can really, rebuild his season and get back on track?
Yeah, I mean, last season, he got 6 podiums, 2 wins, and that obviously wasn't enough to make a massive impact on the championship. He knows how to navigate around Baku a little bit, doesn't he? And he seems to sort of have everything in front of him at the moment, doesn't he? He's got a very decent car, and he's driving exceptionally well, but then there's these little hiccups that keep coming in, and he sort of took a little bit of the blame himself. And I kind of feel awkward talking about it because I really like Yuri and I think that he's a fantastic driver. I really do. So I'm kind of hoping that Baku will kind of help him and the team reset maybe a little bit, reset his championship. So I wish him the best of luck. He's got his head on his shoulders. He's not letting any of what's happened to date affect him. He was chatting away in the roundtable press conference just before Monaco. So none of that's affecting him. He's upbeat. He's very positive, and I'm sure he'll do his best in Baku.
He will indeed, and his fellow Red Bull junior, Jehan Daruvla, Lawrence. We spoke last time on the show about him potentially. He's been so consistent this season, but potentially not quite having had the pace so far this season to turn that consistency into a win and go to that next level. Third time he's come into Baku, obviously third year in Formula 2. Will that work in his favour, and can he put a weekend together, qualify on pole, and potentially take the feature race win?
It should certainly work in his favour, having that experience of the track, and knowing how to manage the tyres around this track. That should all help him. And we've seen the last few races that certainly in Barcelona, it seemed that knowledge of the tyres and of the circuit certainly helped Felipe Drogovic to gain that awesome feature race win. So he'll be counting on it, and you sort of feel that he needs to make that little bit of a step up. Like you say, he has been so consistent, but he hasn't quite seemed like he has the pace. He has that sort of extra little 0.5% that it takes to make that the difference between winning and coming second in these races. So he'll want to make that step up this year because it's this weekend, because it's his third year in the sport now, and very rarely do we see drivers having a fourth. You either move up or you move off. And if he's wanting to show that in that packed Red Bull driver program, he's the one that should be moving up next season, then I think he still has a little bit more to prove. His pace is unquestionable, and I think he's demonstrated what he has really well. I don't think he's convinced many people that he's ready to quite make that step up. So that's a really big challenge for him this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. A few drivers in a similar position. LA, I wanted to talk a little bit more about Marcus Armstrong. Has he? I mean, he seems like a new man this year. I'd say he maybe started the season a little bit slowly, but he's really come into his own since his win in Imola, isn't he? Is he benefiting from not being a part of the Ferrari Driver Academy this season? Is that something that perhaps plays on a driver's mind? Going into Baku last season, 15th in the standings. This year, 4th in the standings. It's a big difference, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a huge difference. I mean, he's already 1 point ahead of his entire championship last season. I think he finished on 49 points and he's now on 50 points. So he's now obviously put last year behind him. I'm not sure it's FDA, Ferrari Driver Academy related. I mean, I think that's probably a nice, worthy question to ask him if he does come into one of the roundtables, or the press conferences. He has changed teams, don't forget. That can also have a massive difference. And you're absolutely right. He does look like a new man. He does look like a new driver. And as we've mentioned before in other podcasts, and as we've mentioned before in other seasons, we cannot underestimate Formula 2, because one of the drivers, it got to almost the very last sort of couple of race weekends last year, didn't it? And I think it was anyone in the top 11 mathematically could have still have won that championship, even though obviously P11 was probably unlikely. It was still mathematically possible till very much near the end of the season. So as the math goes, there's still plenty of drivers out there that can turn their entire season around. And Marcus, I mean, he did have the 2 retirements last year in Baku, which was obviously no fault of his own. Sorry, Marcus. But yeah, he's pretty handy around Baku as well, I think. Again, one of the ones that needs to qualify higher, get himself out of the trouble around the midfield, so he's not battling as hard. Because don't forget, you've got new drivers this season. We've got a lot of new rookies this season. And we have the likes of Iwasa, who, is just sort of, Ayumi, who's just blowing everyone's minds a little bit, I think, at the moment, because this is a handy young driver, I feel, that does have a very good career ahead of him. So Marcus needs to watch out for people like Ayumi as well.
Yeah, let's talk about Owasa. Obviously, a hot prospect in that Red Bull driver program, which we've said is very packed. Lawrence, as you say, yeah, where do drivers go for if this is Deruvala's last season? If this is Yuri Vips's potentially last shot at Red Bull Drive, who do we think are most likely at the moment, as it stands, to be looking at a Formula One seat, Lawrence, next season? Do you think there is anyone on the Formula 2 grid that is in a good position at the moment?
I think the one driver that I'd pick out as looking in a good position is Teo Porcher. He's had that strong first season, and it looks like he's building quite a convincing title charge this year. And if he does win the title, then you'd think surely he's shown enough to make it into Formula One. And of course, he has that close tie with Sauber, so there's almost that clear pathway for him into the sport. Where they get slightly more complicated is that Sauber have their own rookie driver at the moment in Guan Yu Zhou, who they'll be wanting to nurture and they'll be wanting to invest in him. And also they have Valtteri Bottas, who is a very, very quick driver, who, although he's probably closer to the end of his career than the beginning of it, he's got plenty of years left and he doesn't seem to be slowing down in any way, shape, or form. So that's when it gets really complicated. And this is part of the sort of the larger debate about F2 drivers making that step up to F1, that we see so many drivers that we feel are deserving of a place in Formula One, but there are only 20 seats there. And at the moment, the rate at which the drivers are coming through the ranks and coming into Formula 2 and performing at that level, the rate at which they're moving through is not at all matched with the rate of F1 drivers who are either being sacked or retiring. So those spaces just simply aren't opening up. And so that's how you're getting into a situation where the likes of Oscar Piastri doesn't have a Formula One seat after winning F3 and dominating F2. And that is really quite troubling for Formula 2 as an entire series, because the current grid has got to look at Oscar Piastri and think, well, if he hasn't made it onto the F1 grid, then how can I do that? What more could you possibly do to get into that position? So this is becoming a real problem for F2, and I really hope that the state of play in F1 can change to give these young talented drivers the chance that they really deserve.
Oscar Piastri and Nick De Vries are nodding their heads in agreement with you, Lawrence. Yeah, it is really tough, and especially, I mean, if we're again going by the rumours in Formula One, particularly around Daniel Ricciardo's seat at McLaren, for example, maybe a few rumours around Pato O'Ward potentially being in with a shot, maybe Colton Herta being linked with various different places on the Formula One grid as well. Where does that leave Formula Two if all of a sudden we're getting drivers from IndyCar coming over? Does that where does that leave Formula Two as a feeder series to Formula One, Lawrence?
Well, that is a really sort of complex one, because McLaren's quite a unique case in the links they have with Herta and O'Ward, whereas they don't really have any F2 drivers in their development program at the moment. It would make sense with them to go with drivers that they're more familiar with. The big question mark is, how does that form in IndyCar actually translate over to F1? Because we haven't seen that transition made in such a long time. And you compare that to the sort of tried and tested F2 method, that O'Ward and Herta almost looked like sort of risky appointments to a McLaren seat if you're doing that. So for an F1 team to go with those drivers over an F2 driver would really be quite a damning indictment on the talent in F2. But it's not a given that move is necessarily going to happen. And there are other drivers that that aren't currently attached to junior teams, the likes of Drogovic, the likes of Armstrong, that could well fit into that McLaren seat. And although their pathway isn't as clear as perhaps Pourchaire, as I mentioned earlier, they have the freedom, they have the option to go where they want. Guan Yu Zhou was an Alpine junior driver, and he ended up at Alfa Romeo. Ultimately, contracts can be ripped up and rewritten if the situation is right. So hopefully that will be the case for some drivers.
LA, where do you stand on this? Do you think that Formula 2 as a feeder series is still in a good place? Do you think they're still pushing drivers through? Obviously, the Oscar Piastri situation isn't ideal, but you still think that it's a perfect feeder series for Formula 1?
Yeah, I kind of do feel like it needs to be. I'm sure they are looking at it. It's not just us here, sitting at home noticing this. What's actually inevitably happening is that the success, the dream of making Formula 4, 3, and 2 an official feeder series into Formula 1, it's absolutely coming together. It's such a success. But the downside of the success is exactly what we've all noticed, is that it's becoming saturated with incredibly amazing drivers. But I don't think there's been this abundance, this many drivers that are this good and this amazing, and they're all good and talented, because of the route they're now taking, and because of all the little driver academies that they're part of, or they're just naturally great at it, like Drogovic, or Armstrong coming into his own this season. It's a problem. It's a big problem, because it's also, I think it might end up having some kind of negative, I'm not going to say backlash, that's perhaps the wrong word to use, but it's definitely going to have a negative impact on the sport, on Formula 3 and 2, if the drivers and if the champion isn't getting a career anywhere. I don't think the problem is in other drivers from other series coming over. I think that the problem is there is not enough Formula 1 teams on that Formula 1 grid. That's the issue. That's where it lies, because all of these fantastic drivers, whether they're from Indy, whether they're from F2, need somewhere to go. These young men and young women, when the women start coming through, they're not going to spend a couple of mil a year, couple of million euros, 5 million, whatever million euros it is, 2 million euros to drive in Formula 2. Are they really going to want to spend that money and then think, well, but I've got nowhere to go after Formula 2 anyway? I've got no career in Formula 2. That's where the problems are going to start, the little niggles, isn't it? And it worries me, it concerns me, as a fan of the sport, that this could end up going a little bit wrong if we're not careful. So I don't know what the answer is. I'm not that clever, apart from to think that we need more Formula 1 teams, or maybe some kind of, I don't know, is it possible that there could be teams that are sort of, say, somebody like Carlin, high tech, can get themselves into F1 with help, maybe a little bit. These teams aren't as wealthy as the Formula 1 teams. Is there some answer there in a couple of the F2 teams becoming a Formula 1 team and taking a driver right through?
I think Formula 2 has really done all it can so far. They've provided the talent. It's just not getting picked up. I think the onus really is on Formula 1 to provide a place for these drivers to come through. And the issue and the frustration for so many fans is that talent is not the only, or in some cases even the primary factor in getting a Formula 1 seat, which is really sad to see. It's because money plays such a big factor, and really there are a few F1 seats where you're sort of waiting for those drivers to move on to create that space. But F1 as a business relies on money, and many of the teams, especially over the last few years, have struggled. And having a driver that comes with a wealthy backing has such an impact on how they're able to perform, and that is an aspect that we're a little bit more free from in Formula 2, which is part of the reason why the racing is so good. But of course, that's not the case in Formula One. So perhaps Formula One can work with the teams to provide certain incentives to get those younger drivers through, because teams like Alpine and Ferrari that have these driver academies, and even Red Bull at times, they have this talent, they nurture it, but their decision is made so difficult by all the financial things at play in the sport, that those drivers aren't getting pulled through. So I think it really comes from that wider problem, and that one will be a tough one to resolve. I can only hope that the talent eventually shines through where those little gaps in the grid open up.
It's a really fascinating conversation. I am unfortunately going to have to bring it to an end in the interest of time, but we could talk about that all day, couldn't we? And I would love to hear what you guys at home have to say on it as well. Let us know in the comments, on Twitter, on Instagram, on YouTube. Let us know what you think on the conversation. And this time last year, we were talking about Jack Aitken returning to Formula 2 and potentially Jack Aitken versus Dan Tixon for a Williams Formula 1 seat this year. So it shows how much we know about Formula 2, Formula 1, the driver market, and how quickly things can change. But no, really interesting conversation, guys. That is all we have time for today, unfortunately. My thanks to LA and to Lawrence for joining me on today's show. And thank you to you guys at home for watching as well. If you've enjoyed the show, make sure you give it a like, subscribe for more Formula 2 content. As always, hashtag the F2 show to get involved in the conversation as well, as we've just been talking about. But from me, Fraser Ford, and all of us here at Inside F2, we'll see you next time.